You have this premise, which is that the more you think, the more miserable you become. So you would suggest that feminism made women think. I don't think feminism made women think. I think feminism filled women's and men's heads with a bunch of lies.
In this video, we are going to watch Michael Knowles clinically dismantle the ideas of feminism in a way that only Michael Knowles can. Tasteful like a traditional Sicilian pasta al norma, and with the riz of Danny Zuko from Grease Lightning. With that, let's get into it.
So, I listened to the entirety of your speech. Well done.
Thank you very much.
However, there was something that piqued my interest. I won't be touching on transgenderism, just feminism. One thing that you stated was you talked about how feminism ruins women, right?
It makes them miserable.
Right, it makes them miserable, things like that, right. However, throughout the entire speech, one thing that, this is a two-part question if you don't mind, you didn't touch base on what feminism is. You actually never defined it. Now, on top of that, one other thing that you stated was that, women didn't have to worry as much. Feminists brought up these worries to women. And, as a man, right, who thinks I'm in college, so that's kind of what we do, continuously on and in, I'm pretty miserable. So are all college students.
I had a great time in college. I don't know.
ITM, comp sci, different story. But when it comes to the logic of thinking, logically, the more you think, the more miserable you are, only because
I don't think that's true.
Well, the more problems arise in one's life.
No, the more solutions arise. The more sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. So I don't accept that premise, but please go on.
Right. So even with that logic being said, right, the only way, or at least alleviating, is women were happy when they thought, quote unquote, less, right? When they didn't have those problems that were brought up by feminists. Then those problems were brought up. So my question is, what would be your solution to, let's say, I guess it's a two-part question. What is feminism in your definition? And what would be the solution to, I guess, solving this problem?
Feminism is the idea that, to quote Gloria Steinem, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Feminism is the idea that men and women are identical and indiscernible for all practical purposes rather than complementary, which was the traditional understanding of sexual difference. So I have to reject a couple of your premises. One, that college students work hard and study. That was never my experience. Two, that college is an unpleasant experience. I found it to be very fun. And three, that women were these ignorant, docile, uneducated creatures, unintelligent and basically worthless before feminism. I think that's so absurd. It's obviously very offensive, but it just isn't true. I think women were much better educated before feminism. You think of one of the great leaders in American politics of the 20th century was Phyllis Schlafly, an extraordinarily educated woman. She single-handedly shut down the feminist Equal Rights Amendment. Without Phyllis Schlafly, that amendment would have been ratified without any question. Phyllis Schlafly was mother of 6, happily married, deeply religious, a housewife, to use what's now become a pejorative term, one of the most influential political figures in 20th century American life. I think women understood the world a lot better before feminism. I think women were obviously much happier before feminism. I think women understood the relationship between men and women and their own nature much better before feminism. So now
Guys, if you enjoy this video and if you want to help me out with my algorithms, a simple thumbs up, a second out of your time would be greatly appreciated. And also, if you are new to the channel or if you haven't subscribed yet and you want to join this marvelous community, then welcome.
You have this premise, which is that the more you think, the more miserable you become. So you would suggest that feminism made women think. I don't think feminism made women think. I think feminism filled women's and men's heads with a bunch of lies, a bunch of gobbledygook that they got from the New Left and the 20th century Western Marxists and all that consciousness-raising babble. And it turned their heads to soup, unfortunately. But even if it were the case that women became more knowledgeable and intelligent and thought more, I don't think that thinking more makes you miserable. In fact, I've only become happier in my own life. I know the plural of anecdote is not supposed to be data, but I think statistics is bunk anyway. And I can tell you I've only gotten happier in my own life the more I have thought, the more deeply I have explored my beliefs, the more I have learned, the more I have read, the more I have lived. And so maybe for some people, the more that they think and the more that they live, the angrier and more miserable that they become. But perhaps that has more to do with what they are reading and how they are living than with knowledge and education itself. Education is about an upbringing. It's about a lot more than just putting books into your own head. And it is my experience that when your education turns your mind more into accord with reality and turns your perception and your imagination up to higher things, then you will be happier. And if your education is a maleducation, and if you're taught a bunch of nonsense and your head is filled with lies, then you're going to be very, very malcontent, and you're going to get angrier and angrier. The question is, what kind of, if you're getting less and less happy the more you learn, what kind of education are you getting?
To me, this is one of the most absurd claims that people take as just fact these days. That before women were given the vote, they basically played no part in society. They were just uneducated, mindless creatures that merely roamed the earth, doing meaningful duties at the behest of their oppressive husbands. And to our collective shame, there is basically an entire generation of women who have been indoctrinated into this mindset these days. A generation of women that not only believe that women were these useless subordinates, but that men were these evil oppressors. This is simply not true, and unfortunately it plays into the Marxist worldview of viewing history as a battleground between oppressor and oppressed. But the level of comfort that we enjoy in today's world is a rarity, and I believe it's why people think this way, or why at least they're easily brainwashed to think this way. The modern person doesn't understand what it would have been like to live in a time before phones and internet and aeroplanes and automobiles. But yet we think about the systems and institutions of the past and we compare them to the modern day standard of living. A 1790 census showed that 4 million people were employed in agriculture in the US. This was about 90% of the population. This shrank to about 70% in the 1800s and so on. Do you know how hard it would have been to be a farmer a few hundred years ago, especially before the steel plow was invented? Plus, during this time, life expectancy was way lower, infant mortality rate was way higher, disease was rampant, and much more. And after this, do you think it really got that much better? Try being a coal miner or a factory worker during the Industrial Revolution. And then not to mention the 20th century was littered with revolutions and wars and world wars, and who were all the people being sent off to be slaughtered? That's right, the men were. But women played a significant role during these times because once upon a time, we had to work together and we had to appreciate the fact that we complement each other. We had to work to our strengths to survive or to make life as bearable as possible. But nowadays what we're seeing is that the further away we get from these survival type situations, the closer we get to androgyny.
Is there any, just to clarify, and no, I think you misunderstood what I was saying. I never had said, or I hope I didn't mention or kind of hint to the fact that women were unintelligent, because that's definitely not.
You're saying they got more intelligent, or at least more educated after feminism.
More aware of their of social problems. So, as an example, feminism fights for women equality. That's the main front running.
That's what they pretend to do. Yeah.
Message.
Yeah.
Now they bring forward, for instance, one thing that feminism at least solved. I like to believe that it did, was the right to vote. Right. Before feminism, that wasn't a thing. Feminism allowed them, in that way, awoke the problem that women are not allowed to vote. They fought for their right to vote. Is that a negative or is that a positive? That doesn't mean that women were unintelligent. No, it just made them more aware of that problem.
Well, you're referring to an earlier feminist era than what was covered here, but I'm happy to address it. The question about the ratification of the 19th Amendment, when you're talking about it within the context of the other progressive amendments as well, is that, I actually mentioned this on the Whatever podcast the other day. It was the most Zoomer I've ever felt in my life. The strange question about the 19th Amendment was not how did it get passed or why hadn't it been passed sooner. The strangest question is, why were there so many women opposed to it? And there were many women opposed to it. The reason they were opposed to it is because they felt that it represented not just a transformation in the way that women were viewed by society, but in how the society was viewed down to its fundamental unit, that prior to the ratification of the 19th Amendment, the family, just about, was considered the fundamental unit. There were women who were voting before the 19th Amendment, but it was in different circumstances. And that after the ratification of the 19th Amendment, the individual became the basis for the fundamental unit of society. Now, this would not be an argument to repeal the 19th Amendment or anything like that, because in fact, even if people wanted to go back to that bygone era, if you were to repeal such a thing and give one vote per household, the single women would outnumber the married women, which would mean that Democrats would exclusively get elected all the time, and conservatives would be giving up half of their votes, just about. But even on something like that, which is so much more radical, would you say that the women who opposed, even the 19th Amendment, that they were just big dummies, they didn't have any thoughts in their heads, they were just doing what their husbands told them to do? No, you wouldn't say that.
No, not at all.
Of course not. And so I think the same principle applies to the more familiar and recent wave of feminism, the second wave in the 1970s. The way that is portrayed in culture, and I think was at the heart of your premise, is that women simply became more knowledgeable. They called it consciousness raising, but either way, that they were just aware of more things. And I don't think that's true at all. I don't think any of those women could hold a candle to Phyllis Schlafly in a debate. In fact, I know they couldn't hold a candle to Phyllis Schlafly because she beat them all in debates. And I think it's history is written by the winners, and the propaganda of that period in the 1970s was written by the second wave feminists, but it does not reflect the truth.
So good job to the young man for getting up and asking these questions. It's certainly not easy, and he did a fine job and handled himself very well. But Michael Knowles smashed that one out of the park, and this is such an important topic for my mind. Feminism as a positive is so often held up as some sort of a self-evident truth. Many simply believe without question that it has been a force for good. And I certainly don't think that many people agree with it these days, and I think that the data would bear that out, but its historical merits very rarely come into question. When you look around you these days, you see blatant obfuscation of gender roles, the war on boys and men, and the scorn and ridicule with which housewives and stay-at-home mothers are received by feminists. And this is a result of feminism, and certainly of a militant type of feminism. One where they believe that there are just no differences between men and women, and the men have just been oppressing women throughout history. And it's just simply not true, and it's not a healthy way to view history. But with that, guys, that's it from me today. Make sure you hit the links in the bio. Check me out on all different social medias, my other channels. Come and say hi, send me an email, and all of that great stuff. And if you guys want to watch another video, click right here. Until next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.